Is doctors versus engineers. Who kills the most? Well, Chairman, members, there's no guests. Well, who does kill the most? It's just crazy. I will not tell you at the beginning who kills the most, but you should have a pretty good idea. Now, how many murders is a serial killer? How many murders do you have to commit to be a serial killer?
3?
No, it's 3 actually. It's 3. Yeah, 3. Harold Shipman. Come on, you all must know Harold Shipman. Oh yes. How many do you think he did?
300.
Well, no, you see, got to get your Juris solicitor, lawyer, you should know. You can only do it if you have confirmed victims, 15. Suspected, 250. So, he's a doctor, and he's killed off 250 people. That's a lot of people. It was noted that he seemed to start off doing this because in his first year of being a GP, he got fined £600 and retired for a year because he'd been writing out prescriptions for himself with morphine. So that's people might have thought, yes. Then there was a complaint made because this particular person thought that their mother had died in strange circumstances. Investigated, didn't find anything. Later, it was discovered what he was really up to. It wasn't just killing people. He quite liked killing people. That was one of the reasons. The other reason was money. He'd go into someone's house, unannounced, who was a patient, and he would administer a massive dose of morphine. And as they were dying, he'd then go around the house and nicking anything that was valuable. And he would also take the will, forge a new will, to give himself some money. So Shipman was doing very well out of this, he really was. He committed suicide in prison, so we don't hear any more of him. We never know how many he actually did kill. So we move on to another doctor. His name was Hugh Wan Lin. He was a herbalist. Now, he had this technique of producing these drugs which he would administer called magic medicines, which were full of all these nasty toxic chemicals. He killed off, suspected killed off, 146 people. He was jailed for 15 years, which worked out at about a couple of months per person. But when he was in jail, of course, he bribed the guards and he set up his practice in the jail. Killing off people there, what a way to go. Anyway, he's still in jail at the moment. Now, if we move on to engineers, now I said engineers probably kill the most. The most. You would not believe what engineers kill. Take the worst possible situation, Chernobyl. Right, when Chernobyl went bang, it was because they had a structural fault in the reactor, which was fine, but when they were testing the cooling systems, which suddenly stopped, the graphite burst into flames, and the reactor just boomed and fired massive amounts of radioactive particles into the air. Now that contaminated West USSR, most of Europe actually, even as far as Wales, the sheep were being contaminated. Now, you just think, how many people do you think died in that explosion? In the Chernobyl works, how many died in the works on that day?
The official number, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a bit higher than that, 64. Yeah, they got us, between 31 and 64 official deaths in Chernobyl. But 350,000 people had to be evacuated from around Europe and everywhere where the stuff was coming down. The 64 deaths were the ones that really didn't stand a chance in hell, because when that kind of radioactivity just fries you, you're dead. The trouble was, it was the ones who lived around the outside who died the slow deaths. 4,000 of them died a very, very nasty death. But worst of all, the people who died of cancer because of this radiation peak was between, and it's big numbers, between 30,000 and 1 million people died of cancer. Now, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? As an engineer, I'm thinking, that is pretty good to get that kind of score, number of people. And as an engineer, but well, no, it's not true. I think I have killed a few, but not many, because I used to design guided missiles and things like that, so I must have killed a few. Right, let's get on to the next man. Bhopal. Who's heard of Bhopal?
Bhopal, yes.
Yes, right. Bhopal, for the younger ones.
Was that the chlorine?
No, it's pesticides. But it was a plant making pesticides in India, in Bhopal. Now, again, it's down to engineering deficiencies. What happened was they had this tank full of methyl isocyanate. Now, isocyanates are used to make foams, and they are toxic. They contain cyanide, isocyanate. This tank got too hot. The isocyanate reacted, and the whole tank just exploded. It killed 2,259 people there and then. Later, 11,000 deaths from people around. People are still dying from it, surprisingly enough. It's a long time ago. When was it?
In the 80s.
1984, yeah, 84 it was. Now, a government affidavit that was released in 2006 stated the leak caused 558,000 injuries, including 38,478 temporary or partial injuries and 3,900 severely and permanently disabling injuries. And that was the Carbide Company of America, who really still haven't sorted it out. Because they weren't American citizens, the system was absolute rubbish. They got peanuts, compensation, absolute peanuts. If it had happened in America, I think Carbide would have been out of business, because that number of people claiming against the company is horrendous. So, do you think that engineers are worse than doctors? Because doctors have a Hippocratic oath, and some of them don't stick to it. Engineers are supposed to ensure their buildings are structurally sound, but how often do you hear of buildings collapsing because they've taken shortcuts and reduced the number
Quite
of...
often.
It's quite often, yeah. Particularly in the developing world, because they don't have the same regulations that we do. Or at least they do, but they don't adhere to them. And so buildings do fall over. And people get killed, a lot of people get killed. But anyway, I think that that's about it, because I'm positive that I've shown that engineers are terrible people. And doctors aren't good either.
Can I just ask for a definition between the two? Because you're talking about people committing murder,
Yes.
where other things are engineered accidents.
No, not accidents.
Are they murders?
Yes, because no, not all of them. The ones I'm talking about, they were deliberate lack of maintenance on the equipment, and when you do that deliberately, that's murder. It's very much like Grenfell. How many times were they told that that cladding was dangerous? And no one did anything. And so people, I don't know whether it's been issued with a corporate manslaughter writ yet, but they ought to be for that. I think engineers are the ones that hide really well. You go and do something and people don't come knocking on your door normally. You might aim a few rungs down and get them to take the blame for it, but the top guys never get done. So, any questions?
Yeah, I think you still have to distinguish more between committing murder and negligence, which ends up in death, but it wasn't planned murder.
Yeah, when you think about designed in, an architect comes up with a building design, quantity surveyor sorts out all the kit, and the people building it make a decision about what they can afford. And so they go for lower grade building materials, not what the architect doesn't know, and so you end up in a situation that the building is not built to specification, and who then takes the blame for when it falls down? Not the architect.
Yeah, I think there's a deep philosophical point there between, as John says, voluntary or involuntary manslaughter through negligence and the more discreet and specific shipment who means to do it but doesn't do it on the same scale. I don't know, we could debate that.
But Q1 Lin, the herbalist, I don't think he actually wanted to kill people. He just wanted to make money with these magic cures that he was selling. So, unfortunately for him, fortunately for him, no one noticed until he had knocked off 146 people, thereabouts. Then he was taken to court. Well, allegedly, yes, suspected victim. So he then went to court and got jailed for 15 years.
Don't know that it would swing the numbers in your favour, but I remember hearing some years ago that a statistically larger than standard group of engineers form the basis of the members of organisations like ISIS.
Well, if you want to make bombs, you ought to be an electrical engineer, don't you?
Exactly. I would struggle to quantify it, but I do remember hearing that.
Yeah, it's very useful if you're in a terrorist organisation. Pipelines. You want to take a pipeline out, you need a mechanical engineer to tell you where to put the bomb, another guy to make the bomb. So it's engineers that are used for all these things. So get themselves radicalised. I mean, the three that two of them took out the towers. They went through very strict training course to become a pilot of those sort of aircraft. But they didn't have to land, did they?
No, the instructors did ask, "What do you want to land the airplane?" No, I just want to land the airplane.
Yeah, that's right.
They did.
Yeah.
The instructor said, "Well, you're learning this airliner. I can get you off the ground. I can get you in the cruise." And they just want to keep repeating that. I said, "Well, what about the landing?" He said, "No, don't worry about the landing part. We want to do all the subjects first." So they learned, but they never learned how to land. Well, there was a reason for that.
Anyway, any more questions? No.
You didn't mention the deaths caused by the drugs given by the doctors.
Oh, well, yes, that's unfortunately.
Which are actually at least 50% of the patients in the hospital are there due to side effects of the drugs.
Yeah, one of the problems which doctors really have very little control over is the number of drugs people are taking. If a doctor prescribes 2 drugs, they've got a pretty good idea what the side effects are. 3, 4, 5, 6, and you start running into so many combinations that they haven't got a clue. And so when you come back with a set of side effects, they can then look at that and say, well, if we swap that for that, that might fix that. But they don't actually aim to kill you off, but they don't know what they're doing.
But they kill an awful lot of people.
I know. That's quite sad.
One of the reasons I was nursing.
Yeah, I think what's it I'm doing? I take 8 a day. What's it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them for my madness. By having those 6, I'm reasonably stable and I can come and do things like this. When I stopped taking them, Carol said, "You take them or you leave." Thinking, yes, I think we ought to take them. Anyway, we have to have a
Well,
vote now, don't we?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. So, what was it, to inform?
To inform.
To inform, it said. Do we feel informed? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, universally everybody
Okay.
feels informed.